Today is January 27, 2016.
Good.
Okay. We are at the studio of Cathy Osman on Ames Hill.
Okay. It's, you don't want to be sitting behind her. So,
Yeah, it just...
no, stay wherever you are, Cathy, but we need to come take this out. Take the hat off. Out there, as you look at them, is he now...
He looks more like a person.
Remember that in doing this, you want to be looking at the person you're interviewing.
Yeah.
Right, so if you're sitting behind that person, how do you do that? Okay, I would even suggest you come forward a little more.
I feel like I can share a little more.
Those easy shadow numbers like that.
Althea can go back and forth.
Yeah, I can. There. Yeah, no shadow.
You happy?
Good. Yeah.
Today is January 27, 2016. We are at the studio of Cathy Osman on Ames Hill in Marlboro. My name is Osman McNeese. Today's production crew is on camera, video camera, David Holzapfel, on audio recorder, Cyrus Burt, and on still camera is Logan McKay. I'd like to ask you a few questions about your background. When did you move to Marlboro?
I moved to Marlboro about 12 years ago.
Where did you live before here?
I lived in Amherst, Massachusetts, and before that, a number of other places.
What are some of the reasons why you moved here?
I took a job teaching art at Marlboro College, and I was commuting to Marlboro College from Amherst, Massachusetts until my children finished their high school, and then my husband and I moved up to be closer to our job.
How many years have you lived in town?
In town, 11 years.
What is your spouse's name?
My spouse's name is Tim Sieber.
What has been his career?
His career is an artist and educator, just like mine. He teaches at Marlboro College as well.
What are the names of your children?
I have two daughters, one named Nora and one named Lucy.
Did they go to college?
They did.
Where did they go to college?
One went to Middlebury College here in Vermont, and the other went to Oberlin College in Ohio.
What did they study?
One studied science, and the other studied dance.
Where do they live now, and what jobs do they have?
My older daughter, Nora, she lives in Chicago, and she's a physician. And my younger daughter lives in Hudson, New York, and she is a creative writer and teacher.
May I ask how old you are?
How old I am? I am 62.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, north of Seattle, in a small town close to the Canadian border called Bellingham. From there, when I was in middle school, I moved to Puerto Rico. And from Puerto Rico, I moved to Los Angeles, where I went to high school in Los Angeles.
How would you describe yourself when you were a child?
I was pretty free. Parents gave me a lot of freedom, so I was able to be out in nature a lot, but I also was very quiet and quite shy.
What high school did you go to?
I went to a high school called Palos Verdes High School in Los Angeles.
What did you do between high school and college?
Well, I went pretty much direct from high school into college, so I think I worked in the summer before I started college.
What college or university did you attend?
I went to a state school in California called Sonoma State College for 2 years, and then I transferred to Berkeley, UC Berkeley in California. And I did 2 years of undergraduate and 2 years of graduate school.
What was your plan of studying there?
Well, when I was in undergraduate, I entered school not really knowing what I wanted to study, but I was fortunate. Within 2 years, I found art, and really it gave me a direction from there on.
What was your graduate degree project titled?
Well, I have an MFA in sculpture, even though I'm more of a two-dimensional artist now.
When did you begin to realize what you wanted to be, that you wanted to be a professional artist?
Well, I didn't really think about being a professional artist. I guess it was a bit of a calling. So I took a ceramics class in high school, and I just was I loved making things. I was also what might have been called in the 60s kind of a hippie. And so I was making shoes and tie-dyeing things, and as much as that doesn't seem like maybe being a professional artist, it certainly took me into this realm of making things.
With whom have you studied?
Well, in California during the 70s when I was in school, there was a pretty powerful and influential group of painters called the Bay Area Figurative School. So they were a pretty big influence on me, as well as a particular ceramic artist named Peter Volkas.
Whose work or what styles do you feel have influenced you on your own?
Well, I've been very influenced by Cubism and abstract expressionism. I'm currently looking more at Asian art, so Chinese and Japanese brush painting. So really taking myself through modernism and abstraction. I'm still an abstract artist, so that continues to inform me.
Can you tell me a little about how the work has influenced your work?
My influences?
Yeah.
Well, I guess I've called myself a landscape painter for most of my career, even though I'm not such a traditional landscape painter, but I take inspiration from the landscape. And I think maybe that has associations to some of those artists where they kind of reinvent something, but it has roots in an observed moment. I think we're always trying to kind of find something for our own, and yet we're always reacting and being in a reactive position to other artists' work. So that's also work that I'm still discovering, younger artists and also my own students.
Would you give me a brief overview of your artistic career?
Well, in that I'm 62 and I probably started when I was 20. That's 40 years. So I was in school, learning, trying to also find a way to kind of motivate myself independently, making some good friends that continued to help inform and encourage and create a community. So I moved to New York City and lived in New York City for 10 years after grad school, and that was a fabulous education of being in a place where there's so many artists working, and there was phenomenal resources to support and to learn from seeing a lot of work. And then New York City got very hard after I had 2 kids, and so I moved to upstate New York and was sort of both full-time mother as well as trying to maintain my practice. I knew I needed a job. It was important to make money, and I was not able to produce much of an income off the work, so I started to teach. And that was a really good thing, because I never identified myself as a teacher of art. And I think it was one of my own children who said, "But Mom, you know, you can teach what you do." And so I started to teach in the Amherst, Massachusetts area, and built up a resume of teaching and exhibiting, which they kind of ask of teachers at college level to both be exhibiting artists as well as experienced teachers.
Yeah.
And so that really led me into this job at Marlboro, where I've been about 15 years. And I tried really hard to balance, I guess, the energy in my studio, the taking myself seriously as an artist, but also continue to teach full-time.
Who or what experiences have kept you continuing to engage in art projects?
Well, I guess now I have to remind myself a lot it is what I love to do, because sometimes you make work and your audience is limited. For me, where I work very large and often making things that aren't very permanent, that I have to really kind of generate a belief that it is a way of knowing about the world. So that gives me always, once I get rolling in a project, it gives me a lot of satisfaction just to have the time and space to make without a commercial, perhaps, side to it. My students give me lots of inspiration as they struggle with the process of making art, and it gets hard and frustrating and seems pointless, that I have to live to my own mantra with them, that, you know, that it is hard, that they're important processes that call upon you to do it. But I guess the core of it is that it is a way of being, is the way I think.
When your children were young, how were you able to balance your work in the studio with your home responsibilities?
Well, it was hard. I remember one daughter hanging on the screen door saying, "Mom, don't go to the studio." No. The studio became this thing that they would compete with, right? Like, oh, she's going to the studio, that means that, you know, a babysitter's coming. You know, there's always going to be something that gets in the way of making art. You know, there's always going to be, you know, I've got to make money, I have to do this, I have to pay the rent, I have to clean the house. So it was a struggle, but it was a discipline, I guess, that I had to work hard at. There were drier periods, you know, when I didn't make as much work. I was lucky for a while that I was kind of able to have a studio that I could go to. But before the kids got into school full-time, it was a juggle. It really was. You know, there was a lot of time where I wasn't as active in the studio as I was after they began to be full-time at school.
Your home is right next to your studio. Has your studio always been at home, or have you rented studio places?
For both. When I lived in New York, we bought a little kind of clothing store, and so the upstairs was half our living space and half a studio, divided just by a door, so that was very integrated. And Tim, my husband's studio, was downstairs. Once we had kids, we kind of had to walk through the studio to get to their bedrooms in the back. But then when I lived in Amherst, I rented a studio in a kind of an industrial building, so that was away from home. And then now they are together, and both have pluses and minuses. You know, the plus of having a studio elsewhere, you go to work, it's just your own space, there's no interruptions, you're there. At home you can always say, you know, make another cup of tea, or I'll, you know, do the laundry or something, but then again you can walk in here and, you know, work at odd hours.
They're just going outside to take pictures.
Okay.
Is there a downside? Wait. What are some of the personal differences to having your studio at home?
Sort of find a real work ethic, because it is work, that it's not always fun, that there's some really hard parts to the process of discovery, of questioning, of being rigorous with yourself, which can both stall you because you kind of censor yourself. But then again, if you're not asking some relevant questions at times to sort of what it is you're doing, who your audience is, those kinds of things, I think it's always a sort of move forward, move back. But I do think patience, rigor, a sense of humor and discovery, a sense of having fun with it, trust. You really have to trust in a society that doesn't prioritize art in some way here in the States, so kind of trusting that matters. You might say ego.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of different levels of ego that's involved. Sometimes you have to kind of puff yourself up in order to do it.
Yeah.
But other times you have to be really humble, and know that, hey, yeah, is that enough adjectives?
How would you describe your current artistic practice?
Well, having studied sculpture in college and then moving in the direction of painting, where I identified as a painter for many, many years, and as an abstract painter whose work was focused somewhat on the landscape and transmutations of the landscape. But currently, I've been doing much more collage-based work. So I will take bits and pieces and start to build with them. I've been studying some printmaking, and I'll make raw material and then create these very large constructions out of pieces of paper that I mark with printing material on them, and then build from there. Also, I have taken a number of trips to Southeast Asia, and so I've been currently trying to think a little bit about the bridge between the East and the West, and some of the service work and volunteer work I've done there, and what does that mean? So I'm making a lot of baskets now, kind of trying to make a relationship to some of the utilitarian work that the Cambodians do against sort of the ways in which we de-emphasize the craft of basketry or that slow process. So I'm kind of walking back and forth between work that's sort of purely formal and about mark and line and space, and then with work that has this content about some of these tensions I feel between the volunteer work that I do in Cambodia and the teaching of English as a necessary language in the contemporary world, and the sort of losing of some kind of a cultural identity through that.
Would you describe the same of the types of work you make? Some.
Sorry?
Would you describe some of the types of work you make?
Well, I think predominantly it's two-dimensional on the wall, but lately I've been sort of bridging with more sculptural elements off of it, so it's very drawing-based. It's primarily works on paper, but that being said, I will continue to do more traditional painting on canvas. But right now I'm really kind of invested in a much more open work that really is drawn on paper with collage elements. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
The question was, yeah.
What are the tools you regularly use to make your work?
Well, I use a lot of drawing
Feel
tools.
free to get any of the stuff if you
Oh,
want to show them.
okay. Well, I can grab a few things here. Let's see. So these are right here. These are 2 cardboard plates that are called collograph plates, and you can see on here it has the alphabet sort of stuck on here, and this one is just a sort of like a webbing. And I will run these, I will ink them and run them through my etching press and make a lot of raw material. And I will even print on sewing patterns, the paper patterns, and then I'll start to construct with those. So for a long time I wasn't doing any direct drawing or painting. Everything was run through the press, and then I would cut it up and reconstruct with it. I'll get up and I'll show you something very quickly. That way you can have an idea. So if we just look at this little collage, right? So each of these elements have been run through the press, my etching press. There's been an imprint taken, and then I will adhere them to another piece of paper and create an image. So nowhere on here have I hand painted. It's all sort of done through this relief process. Currently I'm kind of changing that and getting back to some direct drawing painting with a brush, a regular brush. I'm using oil inks, but I can also just use India ink, different kinds of China markers, charcoal. I'm pretty flexible. The glues I use, I started off with Elmer's glue, but that becomes very brittle, and now I'm using an acrylic matte medium. So I'm pretty multimedia. I've used a lot of balsa wood, and now I'm using bamboo plates to create baskets, which I can grab now that they've given me permission to get up. So I'm in the process of making as many of these as I can, maybe 50 or 100, and I'm going to make a huge stack of them in front of a couple of very big paintings, trying to sort of get both this idea of refuse, sort of the throwaways, but also some kind of reference to a fishing trap, and then I'll create an image behind, trying to bring this sort of idea of some of the dangers of global warming and the tensions under overfishing, that kind of stuff. So, maybe not fully about painting, but trying to get some kind of dialogue between a two-dimensional surface and then a three-dimensional form. So that's kind of my current project, is to kind of keep trying to bridge these two spaces. But that's just charcoal, right?
Yeah. You said Indian ink?
India ink.
What's that?
Well, I don't think it's really from India. It's an organic ink that's made, I don't know, like sumi painting, brush painting, and you rub a stone on a solid ink, and you create a black ink. So India ink is a water-soluble ink, very black. Yeah, I don't think it has much relationship to India. I'd have to go research that.
Yeah. How would you say your work has changed over your career?
I think it has changed a lot. I think I'm a pretty restless artist, so I don't sort of settle on one way of working. I think I'm always keeping a certain vocabulary going that I work with, but that change it. I think having done sculpture, and I did additive sculpture, like steel sculpture, so I'm sticking things together. So I think that relates very much to this collage work now, where I'm building something rather than perhaps trying to just render and paint.
Yeah.
I think these big collages are new, and then this three-dimensional element is certainly a change, trying to bring it back into a more sculptural presence. And then probably lastly, there's something that's more installation-based, so they're less about being objects as a painting might be, right? They're much less defined in their boundaries. If that makes sense.
What are some of your early interests compared to what you were working on now?
Early as an artist or early? Doesn't matter. Yeah. I think my sort of love of chaos, and then trying to find some order in chaos. So if you look at the chaos of the woods, sometimes, you know, all the down sticks and branches, and, you know, it just seems like impossible that there could be so much information there.
Yeah.
So I like that, and that's always sort of been part of what I've done, whether it be a chaos of just color and brushstroke, or the sort of impossibility of many, many lines. I think that's been a kind of constant, but then what I've done with that has changed.
How do you decide what you're going to make?
It can work both from nowhere, from not a clue, and I'll just start kind of mucking around, mixing up some colors, and usually I'll start with a sensation. So, like, I made a painting that was called "The Fish Are Hatching." So it was just about this effervescence, you know, of sort of something happening in the pond.
Yeah.
What would that be like? So it would be really more sensation-wise. And then now I'm working more with more conceptual ideas. So about this sort of notion of, you know, the English alphabet against the Khmer alphabet, against sort of some kind of environmental issues. So those are probably more idea coming first to the work. But I really am what's called maybe a process artist.
Mm-hmm.
As I make something, then that which it's about starts to inform what it then becomes.
Okay. Would you give an example of your process of making something from first idea to finished piece?
I tend to make things that take a lot of layers, and I will cover up as much as I add. I'll just keep covering up and adding and trying to sort of find a balance between color and line and mark. Because I like that process that evolves as the piece takes on life, sometimes it's very hard to know when I am finished with it, because I could just keep going because I get very engaged by that discovery. I think it's like building blocks, I guess I might say, if you're trying to build a stack of building blocks that are all irregular in size and maybe not all flat.
Yeah.
You know, and trying to piece it together until I can find a balance and an order with it. I think that comes into the language of abstraction. So it's how do things sit on the page? How does one color match itself with another color? How does one line, rather than perhaps my well-rendered landscape in some way? That there's some difference there, but I don't, because I guess I don't have an outcome in mind, a specific outcome of how it should look, but it's always a hunting game. You're sort of hunting for something, and until I don't feel quite so unsettled, I'll keep working on it.
Do you have a favorite period of your working career, or a favorite type of work that you like to make?
Well, I always think that the next piece I do will be the best piece I do. Meaning that I'm never very satisfied with what I have done. Now that could be kind of a stupid way to work. So, so it's hard to say. You know, I guess being that restless artist, I don't feel like I had it back then, and now, you know, I'm less confident. I think I've gained a lot more confidence just because I've been at it a long time.
Yeah.
And I don't think I agonize quite as much as I used to when I was younger. I mean, there was a lot of that artistic angst.
I don't know if it's okay or not.
Yeah. And kind of identity, and, you know, it's hard to kind of be a little more tempered, you know, with my expectations as well. You know, what it means to be an artist. And when I was younger, you know, I felt more pressure to live up to my heroes. And now I'm more relaxed about it's good that where I am now is fine with my making process.
What inspires you?
I still get so inspired when I go to museums and look at other art, whether it be ancient or non-Western. I just love looking at stuff. I really do. Nature does inspire me, but I don't even want to compete with it because it just is so sort of extraordinary. So I'm trying to run this kind of parallel in a way to that beauty that exists, or that kind of power of the landscape. Sometimes what I read, but I'm probably much more visual, so I think most of my inspiration comes from other visual sources.
What role does drawing have in your artistic practice?
Huge. I think I've said drawing probably about 8 times to you already, and I guess it's a kind of drawing that is about the investigation, but also just that the language of the line and the brush.
Describe a typical day of work from when you get up until you finish in the studio.
Well, I'm usually good for 2 to 3 hour stretches. Beyond that, then I think I just start to spin my wheels a little bit, or kind of undo what I've done. So if I didn't teach full time, you know, a great day for me would be, say, you know, 2 hours in the morning, you know, maybe a dog walk or some gardening, and then come back in the afternoon and work. I used to be better at working after dinner, but I'm not so good at that. Often I'll have to do some cleanup in the studio in order to get going, or do some kind of menial task in the studio in order to sort of get my bearing to work. So that's a good day, I'd say. You know, if I can get 4 solid hours in the studio of really productive time, that's really terrific. Because a lot of times you're in the studio, which is really necessary, but you may be doing other things than direct that relate to the action of, you know, of the job at hand, if you will. Even if it's reading the paper in the studio.
Yeah. What do you feel are the more important parts of your work?
The more important parts. Well, I hope that I can make work that communicates, whether it be through beauty and, you know, a kind of enjoyment of the work, but also hopefully it can communicate on some other levels as well. Not that I want my audience to think exactly what I'm thinking, but I hope that it's thought-provoking in some way, that there's some transporting that goes on, you know, that my viewer can feel that they have enough permission to imagine aspects that in the work. I guess that's important to me. And I guess the other thing is that people look at the work slowly and spend time sort of investigating it.
And guessing what it is.
Yeah.
What are some of the parts of the job you especially like?
I like very much feeling completely absorbed. So sometimes I'll forget how much time has gone by, or I tend to work in the quiet, unlike, say, Mr. Tim, who really likes to have music on, or the radio, or I find myself, I can just get absorbed in the process, even if it's just sanding or doing something that might not be seen as terribly creative, but I like that mental space to be quiet.
Can we pause for 1 second? I just need to check. You're back on.
Okay.
Are there parts of the job you dislike?
All the time. And it isn't that I dislike it, but sometimes you get tired or you think, what's the point? That, is it irrelevant? You know, am I being indulgent, or, you know, who's my audience, who cares? But if I can get over those hurdles or over my own insecurities or self-doubts, then, you know, I generally feel pretty good. But it is sometimes hard to just get back at it and ask myself the same questions that I ask my students all the time, you know, and they're hard, you know. When are you done? What are the decisions? Why are you making those decisions? You know, the choice of materials, craft over, right? Freedom, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those kinds of things. Sometimes it's like, oh, whatever. Or because I'm a teacher, it's also really needing to stay up to date, to stay close with contemporary issues, to be relevant, both in my own practice, but also as a teacher. And so that can be sometimes complicated entirely.
What are some of the ways the career of being an artist have changed over the course of your career?
I think it feels like there's a bit of a cynicism about the art world that I sense, perhaps not always personally, but I think within the generations that I've been teaching, that it's all about money, it's about power, it's about the commercial side of the art world, and I think, you know, it's always been a struggle to be an artist. It's always been complicated to find that balance between, you know, private life and all the layers of expectation on the artist. But I do think that on some levels, art has become kind of a commodity that's been traded. And I think that sometimes skews the perception of art and art making from this investigation, this way of knowing something about the world. And that balance of being commercial or also giving yourself permission to do it in this as an investigation.
What do you see as the future of your work in your studio in Marlboro?
Well, I'm preparing the next couple of years to retire from teaching, so that will give me more time in the studio. What that will mean in terms of my career, I'm not sure. I still don't think I'm going to go out and beat the bushes for a lot of shows, but I might surprise myself, you know, take that time, that energy that's spent teaching and try and do more self-promotion. But I suspect I'll continue with a balance of making in the studio and doing volunteer service work in the community. I like that balance of the insularity and the quietness of the studio against something that's very not art related at all, of working in the community. So I suspect I'll continue pretty much at the pace I have been, with probably more freedom to spend more extended hours in the studio.
Now I'd like to ask you a few questions about life as a teacher. How did you become to be on the faculty at Marlboro College?
Well, a very good friend of mine heard that there was a job opening, and so I contacted the school and interviewed and was hired for 1 year as an interim professor, and then I applied for the permanent position and was hired gratefully, and have been there since. Prior to that, I did what's called adjunct work, where I wasn't on permanent faculty anymore, so I would be teaching different courses at different schools, which I think gave me some pretty good experience, and also learning the kind of differences between the really large schools and smaller schools. So I was able to get the Marlboro job without having to go on the market really intensely, which can be really hard and frustrating. You know, if you have to do tons of job interviews and it's very stressful. So I was able to kind of prove myself by teaching at the place I'm at and getting trust that way.
Bella's looking.
I just got licked.
If you don't want to be licked
No,
by her, you
it's
can
fine.
make
I have two dogs
call
that
her
do
the
that.
other way. Okay.
All day.
Okay, because she will love you to death.
For how long have you been a teacher there?
I think I'm into my 15th year, I believe.
What courses do you teach?
I teach multiple levels of oil painting, and I teach multiple levels of drawing. So I'll teach a regular intro to drawing, landscape drawing, and a figure drawing class. And I teach printmaking as well.
Do you have a favorite course to teach?
Well, I said earlier that I really love teaching drawing.
Yeah.
Because it's so immediate and it isn't quite so burdened by oil painting, very slow and messy, but drawing, there's just this beautiful connection towards the concentration of just trying to render something three-dimensional on a two-dimensional surface.
Yeah.
And it's pretty, it just always is satisfying and exciting to see how different everybody's drawings are.
Yeah.
There is no pattern one way.
Would you please describe a typical day of teaching?
Well, I usually teach two courses, a semester plus at Marlboro College. We have a tutorial system, so I will often have individual meetings for back-to-back with my classes. Art classes are 2.5 hours generally at a time, twice a week, so that already is about 10 hours of student contact just in classes, and then pretty much the other hours of the day are filled with one-on-one meetings with students.
What do you feel are more important parts of your teaching?
Well, I think the doing, to actually just slowing down our expectations and just being attentive to whether it be painting or drawing or printmaking. We live in a fast world of digital imagery, and it's pretty hard just to be willing to see what happens. Trying to be generous with the students and encouraging, while also always saying you can try it again.
Yeah.
Right? You can give it another go. You can, push, not so much push yourself a little harder, but just sort of say, let's just step into the next drawing that you do, or painting, or print, whatever the medium might be.
Yeah. What people or experiences would you say have influenced you in your life of teaching as a teacher?
Yeah, well, it's kind of curious. When I was in graduate school, I really didn't have the most positive experience, and so I didn't have a lot of great role models as teachers. I had role models as artists, so to speak, that kind of had this sort of performance aspect, or big personality, or ego, or something. So my learning to be a good teacher has really come from my colleagues as teachers. So teaching in these other places, I've kind of learned to teach, and I think about how would I like to be taught. So in what ways would be helpful for me, and try to find it that way. What was missing for me? What can I do? In ways that both challenge and engage students.
What are some of the parts of your teaching job that you like?
Well, I like just about all of it. I really do. I've totally enjoyed my career as a teacher. I just love that every student brings their own identity to the process, their own way of seeing and knowing. So I like that a lot. Sometimes it's hard to do that, meeting everybody halfway to their ideas and trying to help a student realize their ideas. And so that takes a kind of resilience, because I don't want my students to do what I do. I want them to kind of discover what they want to do. Yeah, and so that, is always a kind of a probing and asking questions and trying to give suggestions, and which is exciting, but also can be hard too sometimes.
Yeah. Are there parts of your job you dislike or find less that pleasant?
I don't like to harp. I don't like to sort of scold or harp, and not that one has to, but sometimes just getting a young person to learn a work ethic, right, that you just have to work really hard and learn by working. There is no magic bullet, it's not always fun, you just have to work, and that part, I don't have to give them the oomph all the time. Generally, I really, every year is a whole new set of people, so, that's exciting. It doesn't become rote ever, right? Because there's always these new voices and these new ideas that come out.
Yeah. So
generally, it's great. I think it's just tiring, right? Because you're back and forth, exactly. Yeah.
What are some of the ways the job of teaching has changed over time?
I think when I was in school, certainly some of those elements, those foundational courses that I still very much believe in, so having to have good, solid understanding of drawing, having to have some background in understanding design. So some of those structures that I still very much believe in, but when I was in school it was all about abstract expressionism, so it really wasn't so much about rendering something to look like, in a naturalistic way. It was so much about sort of, the power of the paint. And now we are very much in a art world of everything is everything. There's a kind of recombining of film, photo, painting, drawing, sculpture. It's always sliding back and forth continuously. And there's also the capacity to make images really fast.
Yeah.
And that's really different because digital just wasn't, right? And so trying to mediate that fast speed at which a young person can image with something that's slower and more contemplative, and trying to understand how an image takes on a kind of a presence, if you will. And that's really different.
Yeah.
It really is. And I love that it's multidisciplinary, how young people learn, but it's also hard then to bring it back to let's just, try to, slow ourselves down, that we can just really try to render a leaf or something.
In what ways have students changed during the course of your teaching career?
I think in a really great way that young people are really interested in ideas, right? That a lot of the foundation of work, of artwork, is coming from a conceptual place. We often will bring an idea, have an idea, and then find the form for it. Yeah. And I think that's partially that art is being taught in an academic context rather than, say, a workshop.
Yeah.
Right? That it's connected in ways to young people's other ideas, their academic interests. And so that's really exciting, right? That there is a really strong aspect of content in the work, what's it about, what's the meaning of it. And that's great, but it also can get in front of just that skill building quickly at an undergraduate level. So I think the young people that I am around now too are really concerned about how to make a living. But there's real practicality, that education is very, very expensive. And so that freedom to just be an artist that's hard. It's hard to pretend that's not, often very real. And it's really hard to find that balance now where I went to state schools, I didn't have much loans, I felt like I could always get a job. The economy, you're walking away from undergraduate college with $40,000 in loans. That's serious. That's really hard to then say, oh, I can just be an artist. So trying to find that trust in art can sustain you as a person, but maybe it won't be that which you earn your living from, but you can certainly always get it, woven into your life in some way, incorporated into your life.
What have some of your former students done on to do?
Went on to do?
Went on to do.
Yeah, well, quite a number of the students that we've seen graduated at Marlboro have gone on and done, like masters in fine art and are out working and teaching. Some have gone into teaching at elementary and high school levels, so they may be art teachers, they may be more general subject teachers. We've had students sort of go and do more curatorial work, do museum work, do some art history. But, I'd say, a pretty good percentage have found a way to continue to read. It's something that gives me a lot of satisfaction to leave, the age group that I work with, which is college, to enter the elementary school, which is so full of energy and love of learning, to have an opportunity to play, to share in some way, get to know not only one individual but a whole bunch of you all, to interact in the community, the larger community, right, in a different way, to get to know other parents and teachers and all that. So that's been great. It's been really a treat.
What people or experiences would you say have influenced you in your personal life? And in what ways have they influenced you?
I think really early on, my mother encouraged me to do volunteer work. So I worked in a hospital for a long time. We used to do something called a candy striper. And you'd go and you'd have a cart and you'd go around with books and you'd do whatever might be helpful for the nurses, and I did that a long time. So her, I guess, really wanting me to share in some way, in a non-paid way. I think, having a shared life with my partner and spouse as both artists has been hugely influential. I think having the opportunity to travel also has been incredible, and I'm really lucky that I've been able to experience places really unlike my own. It's given me a lot of sensitivity to that which I have. I have great friends and colleagues that are constantly inspirational. I have people like you guys that are really inspirational, that are stepping out and learning about other people and gear and all that stuff. So, happens all the time.
What are some of your interests outside of art making and teaching?
Well, I really love to garden. I really love making gardens. I love doing perennial gardens, so they are like my paintings. They're always changing. I'm always digging things up and putting new things in. I love really full, vibrant gardens. I do like vegetable gardening, but it's not a passion. And then cooking. I cook without a recipe. It's kind of like how I paint without a recipe. I read recipes, but so that's the other creative outlet. I really, really like to do that. And then, I like my dog. I like walking around with this furry thing.
Is there anything else about your life or work that you'd like to mention, but I haven't asked you?
Well, it sounds kind of corny, but I feel pretty lucky that I have been able to prioritize art pretty much all the way since, I was in college. It really has been the thing that has given me great joy, and amazing that I can share it with my family, with my children. So, you know, I've got this fabulous studio where I've been able to have a job that allows me to put art front and center in my life. So those are pretty great things.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you for the interview. It was really interesting. Hope I didn't ramble too much.
So I'm going to keep recording for a little bit longer.
Okay, I'm going to get up and leave the room now.
Go ahead.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
That was something. That's a lot of questions. That's a lot of writing.
Yeah.
Bye.
Yeah. Thanks, and I will put you on the spot too.